Hey everyone, welcome back. In this chapter, we're going to talk about duct systems, which are absolutely critical for your HVAC system's efficiency, the comfort of your home, and even your family's health and safety. When most people talk about heating and cooling system performance, they tend to only focus on the furnace, the heat pump, or the AC equipment itself. But you're going to learn right now why the duct system attached to the equipment is really what makes or breaks the whole system's performance. So why is airflow so important? Well, think of it this way. If your lungs don't get enough air, then eventually your brain and your body will shut down, right? The same thing happens in heating and cooling equipment and duct systems. Remember my analogy back in chapter 2 when I described undersized ductwork like trying to breathe underwater with a straw in your mouth? Well, this chapter is going to expand on that topic right now. Here's where it gets really important. Low airflow can lead to some serious problems. If your AC doesn't get enough airflow, the AC coil can actually freeze up, and with gas furnaces, restricted airflow can cause the heat exchanger to overheat and crack, which is a major safety hazard. A cracked heat exchanger can leak carbon monoxide into your home, and that's something you absolutely do not want to happen, as it can be deadly if it's left undetected for too long. Furthermore, when airflow is restricted, it increases the static pressure inside your ductwork and your HVAC equipment. We talked about this in chapter 7, but it's worth reiterating here. High static pressure puts extra strain on your system's blower motor, reducing its lifespan and efficiency. And here's the kicker. HVAC systems are rated to deliver a specific number of BTUs of warm or cold air to the rooms in your house. Any duct leakage, reduced airflow, or lack of proper insulation directly reduces the BTU delivery. This means you're not getting the efficiency and output capacity that the manufacturer says your equipment should provide. When your ductwork allows for proper airflow, your heating and cooling system can do its job properly. And that means even temperatures, no more hot and cold spots throughout the house, air gets distributed more evenly throughout the house as well. Your system functions more efficiently, which saves you money on your electric and gas bills. You get better air quality as well. More air through the filter means more dust, pollen, and other junk gets trapped, which keeps your HVAC equipment, your ductwork, and ultimately the air you breathe indoors much more clean. Alright, now let's talk about the different components that make up a complete duct system, and then I'll cover 4 different types of ductwork materials you're most likely to find out there. There are 2 sides of every duct system that you need to understand. There's a supply side connected to your system's air handler that delivers air to all the rooms in your house, and a return side that pulls the air inside your house back to the air handler to be recirculated again. No matter what style your duct system is, the supply side sends air away from the system and the return side brings the air back to the system. There's a few common styles of duct systems found in most residential homes. Those types are a trunk and branch system. This is where you have a large main trunk duct that runs through the home, usually made of sheet metal, with smaller branch ducts feeding individual rooms. The branch ducts can be made of metal or flex ducts, but most homes built since the 1980s will have flex ducts for branches. The second style is called a radial system. This system has a large supply plenum connected to an air handler that connects directly to multiple branch ducts that radiate outward to each room in the house. They're often used in smaller houses and those with open floor plans built by large production builders because they're less expensive to install, but they're usually less effective at distributing air properly as well. Now let's discuss some terminology and the components of ductwork. Trunk ducts. I just mentioned these, and these are the large main ducts that distribute air to the smaller branches that feed the rooms in your house. They're sometimes referred to as trunk lines, and they can be either for the supply or the return side of the ductwork, but not all systems use trunk ducts for both purposes. Think of these as the major arteries in your ductwork that move the majority of the air through the system. Next we have what's called branch ducts. These are the smaller ducts that branch off from the large trunk lines to serve all the rooms in your house. They can be supply or return air ducts. The next one are called plenums. These are generally the large sections of ductwork directly connected to the HVAC equipment on the supply and return air sides. On the supply side, they often connect into trunk lines, and on the return side, they usually connect into the air filter rack and the return drop or the return trunk, depending on the design. Next up are supply boots. These are the last pieces of the ductwork that connect branch ducts to the floor, the wall, or the ceiling openings where the air actually comes out into your home. Junction boxes are air distribution boxes where multiple ducts meet together. Usually you're going to find these on the supply side. The next couple things we're going to talk about are the heel and the throat as far as the return drop. So on a return drop, it comes down from the ceiling generally and makes a turn into the air filter rack and goes back into the system. And what's called the heel is the outer curved portion of that return air elbow. The throat on this is the inner tighter radius portion of the elbow, affecting airflow efficiency. Making these throats rounded can reduce static pressure and increase airflow through the system. Next, let's talk about airflow control and distribution. The vents that are attached to your ductwork are called registers if they are supplies, grills if they're returns, or diffusers sometimes. Changing these up can affect the way that the air gets distributed throughout a room and can actually improve performance if you choose the right type. Next up are dampers. Dampers control airflow in ducts, whether they're manual or motorized. Dampers are always found in zone systems as well. The next thing we're going to talk about are turning vanes. Turning vanes are made to improve airflow by reducing turbulence in sharp duct bends. I'll touch on this more here in a few minutes. Now let's discuss the 4 types of ductwork materials that you're going to find out there. The first one are flexible ducts, also known as flex ducts. The second is sheet metal ducts. The third is duct board. And the fourth are building cavities, which are used as return air ducts, usually referred to as panned-in returns. Let's cover flex ducts first. These are the most common type of ductwork you'll find in homes built over the last 30 or 40 years. They have an interior flexible tube that actually moves the air through the ductwork, and another layer surrounding that tube, which is the insulation jacket for the air duct itself. Sometimes that jacket also incorporates a radiant barrier that is a shiny silver color to further reduce heat gain, especially in attic spaces. Flex ducts are easy to install, but they're also really easy to mess up. I'll explain that more here in a bit. The next up are sheet metal ducts. This is the rigid metal ductwork you often see used as supply and return plenums, trunk lines, return drops, and junction boxes. If your house was built before the 1980s, it's quite likely that the entire duct system is made of sheet metal, including the supply air branches that send air to each room in your house. Today, most of the time you'll find flex ducts used for supply air branches instead, as they're cheaper and faster to install than sheet metal ones. The next material up is duct board. Duct board is made of dense fiberglass wrapped with a foil material. They're often used for supply and return air plenums and junction boxes. Because the fiberglass is exposed on the interior side, they can get really dirty over time, collecting dust and other junk that moves through the air inside your home. Ductboard also tends to be more leaky than other types of ductwork and tends to separate over time as well. This usually happens when cheap metal tape is used to seal the ductboard together instead of a thick layer of duct mastic, which lasts much longer. Next up are building cavities or panned-in returns. These are wall, floor, or even ceiling cavities that are used as part of the return side ductwork and are connected to either flex ducts or sheet metal to move air through the rest of the duct system. Usually panned-in returns are one of the leakiest parts of the duct system that use them because they typically rely on drywall, thermopan, or sheet metal to enclose the building cavities, and those materials are rarely sealed properly together. I'll discuss these issues in more detail shortly as well. The next section is on common airflow restrictions, and these are the bad guys. The first restriction up are kinks and bends in flex ducts. All ductwork needs to be installed properly, but especially flex ducts. Any sharp bends or kinks in them are going to restrict airflow. Another big thing here is that flex ducts need to be supported every 4 feet or so to prevent sagging, which can also kill airflow. The next restriction is a 90-degree turn. Sharp turns in any ductwork restrict airflow. Gentle curves are always better. Just think of airflow like a race car driver at the Indy 500. It can go over 200 miles an hour with wide sweeping turns, but the car would have to slow way down if it had to make sharp turns at every corner. Otherwise, it would spin out of control. In duct systems, those 90-degree turns create turbulence in the air, which is what slows down the air movement. This is where installing turning vanes actually comes in handy. I see this next restriction all the time, and it's undersized ductwork. If the ducts are too small for the amount of air the system needs to move, it's like trying to breathe through a tiny straw. This is a common problem, especially when an old furnace is replaced with a larger one, or when an AC system is added to an older duct system that was originally sized only for heating purposes. Another restriction that we see a lot are panned-in returns. Using wall or floor cavities as return ducts is not ideal, but it's fairly common, especially in new construction. And the restrictions come from lots of 90-degree turns the air has to make moving through them. Not to mention the fact that the building cavities used aren't usually big enough to move the airflow needed for the system. Next restriction up are dampers. These are the adjustable plates inside ducts used in zone systems to reduce airflow and balance ductwork. They're also found in non-zone systems as well, but usually you find these in zone systems in new construction. If they're not set right or they get stuck, they'll block a lot of airflow, and they'll have to be opened back up manually if they're not automatic. The last restriction we'll talk about are high MERV air filters. Like we just discussed in Chapter 7, high MERV filters can restrict airflow if they're too dense or too restrictive for your system. Make sure you pick the right size filter for your equipment and something that's not too restrictive that's going to cause a problem down the road. Okay, let's get practical now. How do you actually find and seal all these pesky duct leaks? Well, you need the right materials to start off with. The first one is metal tape or foil tape. This is a UL 181 rated metal tape that's for duct systems, not duct tape. I know they call it duct tape, but it's not actually for ductwork. The next material that you want is duct mastic. This is your best friend. It's a gooey sealant that's perfect for larger gaps. It's kind of like a wet putty and it comes in gallons, and you paint it on with a 2-inch chip brush. The third one that you're going to use is silicone caulk. This is used for smaller gaps and tight spots, where if you just want to seal a seam together, you can use silicone caulk and it's perfect for that purpose. So first things first, sealing ductwork located outside the conditioned space is most important. This means any ductwork in ventilated attics, ventilated crawl spaces, or garages needs done first. Since that air isn't staying inside the living space of the house, any leaks there are a direct waste of energy. However, ductwork located inside living spaces should also be sealed. This is especially important to deliver the airflow needed to all the rooms furthest away from the HVAC equipment. This is a really common problem in 2-story houses or more, where the HVAC system is located in the basement and it's trying to send air to the top. The air often doesn't make its way to the top floors as well as it does to the basement and the first floor. It's also an issue in ranch-style homes where the HVAC system is on one end and there's a long distance to the opposite end of the house. That far side usually ends up being hotter or colder than the rest of the house year-round. Sealing ductwork and insulating the supply side of the duct system can really help reduce those temperature differences. Another place you want to seal are at the equipment connections. This is where the ductwork actually connects to the furnace or the heat pump unit inside your house. Another leaky spot are flex duct collars. Those metal collars that connect flex ducts to plenums, trunk lines, and junction boxes are often big leakers. Seal them with duct mastic preferably, and you'll need to move the insulation jacket back from the inner liner so that you can seal metal to metal in these connections. The air filter rack itself is another big one. Seal all 4 sides, both the intake and the output side of the filter rack, to the duct system or to the equipment. If the output side isn't sealed, air can bypass the filter and get into the system. Another place to seal are the duct boots. Seal all the duct boots directly to the drywall or subfloor, not just to the grills or registers. This one is often missed in new construction, and when we do duct leakage testing for code compliance, this is one of the main things that can cause the house to fail. The last one up here are trunk lines and junction boxes. With trunk lines, if you have a metal trunk line, wherever you see these metal straps, that's what connects 2 pieces of sheet metal ducts together, and those straps need to be sealed on both sides with either metal tape or duct mastic, or you could even use silicone caulk if you wanted to for this purpose. Make sure every one of those straps, including the ones on the ends of the trunk lines, are sealed really well. So with junction boxes, you want to make sure that any collars or supply branches that connect into those junction boxes are sealed metal to metal with duct mastic. Do not seal the insulation jacket to the insulation jacket, as this will still allow for duct leakage to happen inside of the insulation, and ultimately it doesn't really help anything. Now let's discuss ductwork insulation. Insulating ductwork, especially in attics or crawl spaces, reduces heat loss or gain, and it makes your system a lot more efficient overall. Remember, if your ducts are leaking or poorly insulated, you're losing those valuable BTUs before they even reach the rooms they're meant to serve. There's a few different types of insulation that we're going to discuss. The first one is bubble wrap or Reflectix insulation. It's easy to install and it's not as itchy as fiberglass, but it's also less effective if it's not installed correctly. In order to get the claimed R value from the Reflectix, you need to have a 1-inch airspace between the duct and the bubble wrap itself. And most people don't do this, so it's usually not very effective. The second insulation type is much more common, and it's just fiberglass duct insulation. Fiberglass can be either external or internal, but external is much better. Internal insulation can collect dust, and if the air is humid inside, it can become a breeding ground for mold, mildew, and fungal growth inside your ductwork, and that is horrible for your indoor air quality. The last insulation type is closed cell spray foam. This is a less common but a highly effective way to seal and insulate ductwork. It's more expensive than other methods for sure, but it creates a really tight seal and provides excellent insulation that generally won't degrade over time. The main drawback, other than the cost, is that it's really difficult to remove from the ductwork if there's ever an issue that needs to be fixed later on. Once it's on, it's really on for good. So that's a wrap on Chapter 8 on duct systems. Remember, proper airflow is key to a comfortable, efficient, and safe home. By understanding your ductwork and addressing any of these issues we've discussed, you can make a huge difference in the comfort and indoor air quality of your home. I'll see you in the next chapter soon.